Okay, Anamage Bina. Welcome back. Aadizookaan. Iba, tonight we're gonna have a good story. And I thought maybe we'll do something a little bit different. I'm gonna tell some stories that aren't actually on birch bark scrolls, but maybe one day they will be. So I'm going to tell some stories about Turtle Mountain, some of the events that happened there. I don't know. Probably I think most of them, there's a few that happened in the early 20th century, but most of them are in the 19th century. Okay. But people have been asking me about this one particular story, and so I'm going to tell it. It's we call it Manitou Madudu Swan. Manitou Madudu Swan means or Madudu, Manitou, or some people say Madudu or Tutu Swan. God's nest. What is God's nest? And this is how our sweat lodge came to be, according to legend. Okay, how we got the sweat lodge. There's not a lot of stories how the sweat lodge was given, but it was in a time, again, when the people were in chaos. And there was a lot of infighting, and the plight of mankind was kind of just going downhill. Everything they had been taught and given over time, they kind of resulted back into their old negative ways and stuff. So there was a lot of abuse in relationships with children. The story also indicates there was abuse of animals. People weren't respecting anything. There was a lot of anger. And when there's a lot of anger and stress within humans, humans change. And it results a lot of times in people getting sick, having some kind of affliction. You know, could be ulcers. It could be just a lot of things, you know, that isn't healthy as a result of, you know, so I think we pretty much all know that, you know, when you're under a lot of stress or angry or, you know, just having all these problems and not dealing with them in a positive way, you know, people get sick and just, they start acting abnormal. So this was what was going on. And a result of this, in one particular family, it said that this one elder, he didn't have a big family, but he lost his son, his daughter, and his grandchildren. And he was all by himself. And of course, these things went on, and this old grandfather, he decided that, you know what, I'm just gonna leave the people here and I'm gonna go out in the woods. And sometimes it's heard that elders did that. They kind of just quietly went off into the woods and they decided they were gonna die. You know, life wasn't worth fighting for anymore, much less worth living. So this is what he did. And he walked for quite a while and he came across this big tree and he was tired. And he sat down next to this tree. And he was just, it was a nice day. And he just thought, well, this is a good place, he said. It's a good day to die, he thought. Good day to die. And he said, I'm going to join my son and daughter my wife, my grandchildren. And I know where they're at. They're happy. And so that's where I want to be. So he just sat there for the longest time, and he started slowly trying to breathe less and less and less, and to slow up his breathing. And what he was hoping is that he would just quit breathing and his heart would stop, and he would just pass on and make the journey. Well, that didn't quite happen. And well, he had his eyes closed and he was concentrating like that. All of a sudden he heard a voice saying, "You're old man, you're not going to die. You're not going to die. You're going to live." Oh, he said, "Oh, why?" Why? He said, "I've had enough of this life," he said. And hear this voice says, "No, you're going to live and you're going to have purpose again." And this old man, he opened his eyes and he was looking around and thinking, "Who's saying this? Where are you?" Here he looked up beyond some of the branches of that big tree, and there was this big eagle sitting there looking down on him. He said, "I give you a gift. I give you a gift." And here that eagle, he moved, and here he was sitting, he was sitting there on a branch, but also there was his nest. Jumped on that nest and he started jumping on it, this eagle. And all of a sudden, just like that, that nest teetered and it come flying down, kind of hitting this branch, that branch. And they're pretty big. Some of them are 10 feet, maybe 12 feet wide, long. And so when it actually hit the ground, it just, this old man was sitting there, and here he covered up. And when he looked here, there was just this frame from this nest that the eagle had made, this frame, but it was so weaved together and so strong that the rest of the branches, it just fell to the ground. And that eagle flew down, flew around, and he landed on top of this frame, his nest. And he says, "I give you my tail," he said. "I give you my tail." He said, "This will help you guide your prayers, help guide your prayers. Also, I give you my legs," he said. He said, "Causes me to stand upon the earth and the trees." He said, "These are the gifts I give you," he said. And he said, "From the earth," he said, "you shall be healed and your people will be healed. I give you my nest," he said. And then this eagle awkwardly flew off. No legs, no tail. You watched him for a long time. And then he couldn't see him anymore. Well, this old man, he got up. He was looking around, kind of stepping over all these branches and twigs and whatnot. He was looking at it. And he was looking at it and kind of scratching his head. And, okay, he looked down at these eagle legs and his big tail feathers that the eagle had clipped off from his backside. So he says, "Well, okay." He said, well, he knew this thing was too big to carry, this nest. So he took the legs, took the tail, made the trip back to his village. Yeah, sure enough, nothing had changed. People were still arguing. being mean, could hear crying and screaming. You know, he just went into his old lodge, laid down. Here he was looking at his lodge, his wigwam, the dome shape. And he thought, this is just like that nest, he said. It's like the frame of a nest, but a little bit smaller. And so, by gosh, next day he went out and he cut some willows and made these holes in the ground and he put them down there. And here, went got those eagle legs, that tail, and he sat there and he was thinking, you know, here he fell asleep. Here in his sleep, here he heard these things underneath the earth rumbling, rolling. And they were talking to him, saying, use me, use me, use me, use me. And so he here realized what they were rolling. These were rocks under the earth, rolling. And so he said, I'm cold, heat me up. I'm cold, heat me up. And so anyway, he got these, and he woke up. And he thought, okay. So he went out and got some rocks and he made a fire and started heating them up. And he thought, well, you know, they were getting the heat up, and here he thought, well, I'll bring them in here. So he brought him into the sweat lodge. And he had trouble with it. So he took those legs, he was moving those rocks, bringing them out, moving those rocks like that. And he sat in there and he all of a sudden he went to his lodge and he tore it down the outside, he wrappings, he started putting it there. And here he went and got some nebish, some water. And he took that tail and he started splashing it with the tail. And it created this steam. And here he thought, oh, this is a fine gift, he said. Hey, all of a sudden he heard somebody say from the outside, what are you doing in there? He said, I seen you heating up rocks. He said, you brought them in here. He said, I hear that sound. He said, what are you doing? Here he opened the door, this old man, and here he peeked his head in there and hear all that steam come out. Oh, what are you doing? He said, I'm throwing water on these rocks. He said, I'm praying. While I'm sweating, he said, I'm praying. Oh, he said, why? He said, and then this man, he says, because this is my Manituma Dudu Swan. This is God's nest. God's nest, he said. He promised to help us, he said, if I built this here. My gosh, that man came in and he started talking about all his problems he was having, and if the Creator could help him with his problems, he said, I'm suffering in here. I'm hot. I'm sweating. He said, I'm really uncomfortable. He said, certainly this must be a sacrifice for something. And so anyway, this man came out and he had more clarity about himself and about his problems, about the things that were going on in his life. And here he started working on that and because he saw more clear, it was spiritual. And here, my gosh, he told some of his friends, it wasn't long, that sweat lodge started, a lot more people were coming in to the sweat lodge. And over time, people were healing in the village. They were getting better. They were putting away their anger and their frustration. People started laughing and helping one another again and being kind to each other. And people quit being sick. And women were laughing, men were laughing, and kindness and love returned to the people. And the sweat lodge, this God's nest, it stayed there. And that old man, he was the first patron, the giver of that through the crater, and his emissary, the Kinu, the eagle. Okay, so in time, they didn't use the eagle's legs. What they did is use 2 sticks to help situate those stones. And instead using his tail feathers, they would cut some of the grass and wrap the end of it like a somewhat of a broom. And they'd dip it in the water and sprinkle. They, but today they got all kinds of metal dippers. Some use cups and buffalo horn, the buffalo things. Some use deer antlers instead of the legs. But this is our story, the Anishinaabe, and that's how the sweat lodge came to our people, because they were suffering. And they got off the path. And it was through the sweat lodge that our people made their way back. Yeah, okay. Any questions? Manitou, she's. Huh? No, I don't know whose brother he was. He's just an old man. Doesn't say. A good old man. Matutu Swan, Manitou Matutu Swan. God's nest. So that's why they call it, that's why it's called like that in Chippewa. It's God's nest. And the eagle offered his nest as his nest, the frame of his nest, as the first example of how it should be, being close to the earth as we are. And he gave part of himself. And of course, the rock people, the stone people, they helped us along with that. So when we go into the sweat lodge, the Matutu Swan, one of the first things we do is we thank the grandfathers. And for the women, they say the grandmothers. And we thank, them for offering up themselves. Also, we thank the water spirit and the fire spirit and the mist from the air, that combination of fire and water, and that earthly element, the rock, and to make that steam. So, yeah. So those are one of the first things we do, is we thank those spirits for helping us here. And of course, the eagle, so, and the creator. So, yeah. So we always remember those things. So, yeah.
Good question.
Okay, Mr. Pronto.
Well, I mean, I sweat almost every drive in the state of Montana.
All right. Mm-hmm.
I understand the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Tribes, grow differently, and the black seed and black differently, that type of thing. But I was trained and given the right to run a sweat lodge through the Gopher their plan. And when we run the sweat lodge, obviously we a lot of times we'll just do 4 rounds. And then every once in a while, maybe the 5th round. Sometimes they call it a buffalo round.
Mm.
Do a 5th round. What we do, we have a recognition.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's 7 or 8 people or 9 people who come to swim, we make sure that everybody has to come.
Right.
So if there's 7 or 8 people, obviously there's 7 or 8 rounds. Now, my question is, and that's the Chippewa style, at least Do they do it differently or same, like over the mountain or say over in, or, you know, let's say maybe over in, Wisconsin, you know, some of the Chippewa tribes over there, do they do it that way too, or is it just 4 rounds?
Well, I think what I've learned about our people is that we're fluid. You know, there isn't no really set way where things have to that can't be adapted. Okay, we don't in answer to your question, no. As far as and I'm talking about the rounds. Now, the man who's asked to do the sweat or woman, they still sit straight across the door and the door face east. So that person usually starts it off and then passes the pail to the next person. Now, what is considered a door can be anything. Maybe that guy will empty that pail and then the door will be open. It could be that the pail will go all the way around to the door and then the first door. Okay. Or it could all come around back to that person that started it, and that's considered a door. Okay. So it's up to that person that they honor the 4 directions, the doors, so to speak. Now I know the women, they'll pass the pail completely around, you know, go and not stop in midway more times than others. As far as the men are concerned, I usually see it where, you know, it starts in the west and then when it hits the east like that, then we'll stop for a door. Okay, and then continue around. When it comes back to where it started, you know, that person who given the sweat lodge, that's usually the second door, again, third door, and then around 4th door. Okay, it doesn't always happen that way. It depends a lot on why the sweat lodge is being put up. Sometimes there's doctoring going on there, or maybe somebody is really sick, and that sweat lodge is being held for that sick person. Therefore, the men and the women will endure more suffering, you know, as far as staying in the sweat lodge and the steam, it's hot, you know. Now, our people, I can't speak for the other tribes. It is, you go in there with humility and respect towards the lodge itself and all living things. You don't go in there for the purpose of knowing if there's newcomers that you would pour so much that this person is not used to it. It's his first time. He's going to get hot. He's going to get burned. You're going to scare him, you know, and that's the last thing you want to do is, you know, him run out and not want to come back, you know, and have that kind of bad experience. So a lot of times they're told if it's too warm for you, let us know, we'll open the door right away. So we're to have empathy. And so the rules aren't so fast that they can't open the door before ahead of time. Okay. But one is not to pour so much water on the stones that you're testing the strength of everybody. Now, granted, there are a lot of people who take sweat lodge regularly and sometimes twice a day. I've seen it, and their hides are really tough and they can take a lot of heat. But yet, you're not to show off, and to do that, it's all supposed to be humble. It's a spiritual thing. So that's what I've seen and I've witnessed. So, and been part of, and the old people explained it that way. So the same way with the stones, some people will only maybe have 4 stones come in per round, or maybe they'll have more, depends how many they heat up, these grandfathers. And but I've been in these Madudu swans where they've piled in 24, 36 rocks where they're just heaping. Something's bad's going to happen, because you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to show off like that, because when you're sitting down and those rocks are piled up as high as your shoulders, I mean, something is bound to happen. It becomes too dangerous. You're not to do things like that. So everything in moderation. And you gotta, and that person is responsible for all those people that come in. He's responsible for their welfare. And so also, if the lodge, our people don't build these big humongous lodges that can fit like 20, 30, 40, 50 people. And, that's something new age. The most I've seen probably in a lodge is maybe, including the person who leads it, is maybe 10 people. Maybe 12 if you fit in there like sardines. But that's a lot. Now, if there's any more than that, then they need to take turns. Come in, go out, come in and go out. So everybody's got a chance to, say their petition, their prayer. So, yeah. And there's more to our lodge than what I've talked about. There's more to it. Before you go in, there's some ceremony, some ritual that take part. And then there's, how the sweat is conducted. I just briefly went over the basics. And then some of the things that happen at certain doors. Sometimes fruit and berries is offered to certain spirits for, sometimes cloth is brought, tied and put up where that person brought it in above them. Offerings. There's just different things. Now, probably the toughest sweat lodge I've been in, and I was told it was going to be tough, is the Anishinaabe warrior sweat. Okay. Where is that at? You want to know about that? There's only one stone, one grandfather. Yeah. But it's a miniature boulder. Okay. It's probably the size of a basket. Okay. So I would say it's probably diameter straight across is probably well, it's the size of the seat, maybe a 1.5 feet, 16 inches by 16 inches. It's pretty big, solid granite. You can't lift it with a pitchfork, so they groove the ground from the fire pit all the way. No, they don't push it. So it creates a rolling path. So what they do is they cut a young sapling, could be anything, I guess, a poplar, aspen. They cut it kind of thin, and they bend it, and then two men, they put it around it and they pull it on each side, see? And they kind of bend it and pull it because the sapling is green, and they pull it and roll it like that. Okay, so once it gets to the door, they continue to bend, they step on it, bend it, and make it kind of like a U, and then they push it in like that. And then there's no doors. There's no doors on the warrior sweat. Pale water, you're staying there for good. So believe me, that thing doesn't cool down. So usually men would go in there if they were known they were going to go on the warpath, and with the idea that they weren't coming back, because you never know. So they were just going for it. And then usually when they come back like that, it's more about grief because of if they were involved in the killings, then a lot of times those spirits, you're responsible for them. And so there has to be a reconciliation. And so that's why the sweat has to be very intense. To cross that border, that spirit will come in there, and you have to reconcile it. And so, yeah. I've only went in a few. So that's
You have to really prepare yourself for mentally before it goes.
yeah, well, usually the man who's putting it up, he's a veteran, and he if it's your first time, he will definitely. So usually that first so-called round, when they go around, they take it easy on them, but they just, it gets warmer as you go, and yeah, you're not to open the door, not to say that if that person wants to go out, that he can't again, he can. So I've never heard of women having warrior sweats. I know there was I know of a woman going to a man's sweat. She was a veteran. She wanted to go. So they allowed her to come in. But that was in a Dakota way. Usually you have to find an old lady who will take that woman in our way. Sometimes not only just the warfare itself, but women in the military or in circumstance, sometimes they undergo different kinds of trauma than men. Sometimes it's sexual trauma, where their things happen to them. Not saying it's their fault at all. It just, some men are so disrespectful, and they're, animalistic. So anyway, so that's a trauma that usually men don't undergo, that sometimes women have that associated with them. So that's why it's better that women have sweats with women, or they can find an old woman to take them in, so to deal with that trauma. So yeah. And that's why sometimes the women's sweat lodge takes a lot longer. Because when I was younger, I used to be the doorkeeper and firekeeper for the old ladies up on the Rocky Boy when I was young. And I mean, sometimes their sweat lodge is last very much a morning. I mean, a full 4 hours, 5 hours, or in the afternoon. I mean, they just, their prayers and the way they look at the world and their families, community is a lot of times different from a man. And so they seem to be very detailed more in their prayers. So, yeah. So that's why a lot of times they go the long rounds. You know, a woman is I think physically and spiritually, emotionally stronger than a man. So their sweat lodges seem to last a lot longer, more intense, yeah, than what I've experienced with on the male side. So, yeah. Anybody else? Are we done already? 7. Oh yeah, I'm going to tell another story. Any questions out there? Anybody have any questions? Mm-hmm.
I just want to have kind of a question and put something out there. And you find that, and I'll use this, as an example. I didn't go along with this, but when we were getting ready to go over to run, there was a lot of native brothers, different tribes. I think it was down in Louisiana. But anyway, the military was starting. The military understood the importance of the sweat lodge to our riggers, and they allowed, in some bases, some military bases set aside land or allow some of those soldiers to go build a lodge, and or there was already a lodge, I'm not sure, but they were able to sweat down in Louisiana, I believe, before we went over to
Mm-hmm.
and I just found that interesting that it seems like a lot, not only the military, but especially the Army and Marines, really know, the tribes and based on history and, do you find that maybe organizations or groups or how do you say it, institutions, so to speak, are starting to learn more and accept
Yeah.
sweat lodge as a, respect that teaching and culture part of it?
Well, as our people assimilate more, I should say, I guess in the past few generations and this generation, as we willingly assimilate, because we know that's part of the circle of life. We have to, either we start living or we start dying, so to speak. So as like you said, these organizations that see a large quantity of indigenous people, I think they understand that we're people of the earth. We don't have so-called organized religion. Our religion is basically tribal and our perceptions of life and the creator. But all tribes today, they have a commonality in their beliefs. Some tribes never had sweat lodges. I'm pretty sure the Inuit didn't have them. Okay. I know a lot of the southern tribes had these lodges, but they were built different. But it all centered around these grandfathers being brought in. Some didn't pour their water. It was just a dry kind of sauna. Yeah. Yeah, the Navajo, I believe, and the Apache do it that way. So I don't know about the southeastern tribes or the most western tribes. I don't know. But I think if I was of a tribal member that had the opportunity to go into sweat lodge, and my people didn't have that historically, and I was invited, I would probably go, because to feel that unity and prayer and suffering, that we're going to go through something together, life and death, and that, this brotherhood, that solidarity, it's going to defined in our spiritual, emotional, physical world here, and to go through that. Tribes are more receptive of other tribes' ways now, and I think that's really good. Yeah, there is, we're more receptive, open to others nowadays. And I think I'd like to think in a positive way towards white people too, and their religion. I mean, we do understand that the Creator created all people, not just us first or them first or that. And so if we're walking in a spiritual road, then we'll listen to what other people say. We don't have to accept it, but we don't have to be, we should appreciate whatever somebody says to us, not necessarily put them down for that or something like that. But I think, yeah, so I think that's good. Yeah.
Grace said the story helped her understand when it takes one person to make an impact, and she would like to know how to do it. Do you have the need to go to the sweat lodge?
Grace is old enough to go into the sweat lodge. Usually I would say 7, 8 years old, but if they're going in the first time, it should be just an experience that just experience the atmosphere, because it's very warm and muggy and humid in there, because it's a closed environment, and a lot of steam, and so it's dark, not pitch black. I didn't say pitch black, but it's dark. It's a different environment for sure. But yeah, I'd say, what did they say, 7, 8 years old, they can start coming in. And of course, they should always go in with somebody that they feel safe with, comfortable, especially your first few times. So, yeah. Yeah, Grace, go for it. Any more questions? We are going to have a sweat lodge out here this spring. We're building 2 sweat lodge here at the little right on the east side of the cultural center. Is that the east side or west side? East side. Yeah, the east side, right behind the cultural center here. We've got the support of the council. And so one will be for the women and the girls. The other one will be for the men and boys. They won't be sweating at going into sweat lodge at the same time. We will have a dressing house there, so you can change into your sweat lodge clothing. You don't go in with your regular clothes. Men usually wear swimming trunks. Boys, the women and girls usually wear some kind of a very light, loose-fitting dress. So they're somewhat comfortable. Yeah. So we're gonna get that all started this spring. In fact, we're working on it right now, getting the materials ready and all that stuff. So, yeah, so it will be happening. Okay. Any other questions?
So being in the Great Falls area, having the multiple sweats, different people, and they've all been different now, like we did quite like I think that was the same, you said, no, and people do different ways. Is there any harm going to different sweats or anything like that, or?
I don't see no harm in it. We've had people come from different parts of the country and we have a sweat lodge and we invite them. Of course, we invite them. And they don't have to go, but if they want to participate, they sure is welcome. And most people, especially first timers, they just want to try it out, have the experience, you know. If you're going to go to another ceremony that is more in depth, sometimes people will go to the sweat lodge first to prep themselves, go through so many sweats, you know, in so many days. So if they're going to be doing something or taking a journey or anything, always the sweat lodge is recommended. So actually, going into an environment like the sweat lodge where, I mean, it's an uncomfortable place. I mean, some people really enjoy it. I mean, but at the same time, it's, I don't know, I'd rather spend my afternoon fishing than or taking a walk or doing something, getting an ice cream then. But not to say a sweat lodge isn't a good thing, but, you know, to have the opportunity to help or assist people in whatever journey they're on, you know. But yeah, I've gone into other tribal sweats and other tribal people have come into ours, but the kind of sweat lodge we're going to have here initially is the Anishinaabe way. If there is a man, a Cree man or a Blackfoot man, comes into the sweat lodge and he's asked to lead that sweat lodge to say he can't do it here. No, that's fine. If he wants to run a sweat lodge for some people, the Blackfoot way or the Lakota way or the, you know, the Crow way, I mean, I don't see a problem with it. Initially, the sweat lodge is for our people, so we have access to it continually. So I don't know. It's a lodge to pray. It's a lodge pray. So yeah.
So,
Well, right now I have been working with 3 women, training them, gotten permissions from some elder women to do that. Give me permission to train them and teach them some songs, women's songs. Also, I will be training Travis in the way of the man's sweat lodge. So he'll be able to run sweat lodge. When the men are going to have the sweat lodge, there'll be somebody. But I'm also looking, I know Richard runs sweat lodge. But who knows, maybe Travis won't be available one day or and you know, who knows, but it'd be nice if we had a nucleus of men, a few more men who could do that. And then yeah, so Yeah. Okay, we can go on to another story. How much time we got? Okay. Oh, yeah. There's two, at Turtle Mountain, there's two springs that are considered sacred and holy by our people. And these springs have been there a long, long time. And the waters are considered very sacred. In fact, so much, and the irony of one of the springs is when the church had what they thought concluded into getting a lot of the Chippewas at Turtle Mountain, getting them to quit practicing their old ritual ways, traditional ways, and converted them over to Catholicism. The church would go there and gather that water by the milk can type, the old type milk cans, and they would bring it to their church in Belcourt, and they'd use it for their holy water. Okay. So even they believed that the water was sacred. Okay. This spring is located by the reservation line, the west reservation line, and right on the foothills, and it's a pretty large pool of water. I would say it's probably about 30 by 30, and there's, from what we know, there's no depth to it. Apparently in the 80s, they tried to take a small boat out there, paddle boat, and they fastened weights to a cable or to a rope, and they dropped it down the length of the rope, you know, whether it was 50 feet or 100 feet or, and but it went down 300 feet and they ran out of rope. And that's pretty deep. So we do know that under Turtle Mountain, there is a giant aquifer that actually is larger than the circumference of Turtle Mountain itself. Okay, so Turtle Mountain is 52 by 36 miles. Okay, so and that's basically our aquifer, our water. Our tribe owns it. Okay, yeah. So to say that this springs comes out of that aquifer, possibly, I wouldn't rule it out. Others say out of Devil's Lake, which is to the southwest, there's underground channels that go to Devil's Lake. And the reason I say that is getting back to the original story as it was told by me. Long time ago, before there was too many people in that part of the country, human beings, certainly not white people, but native people. And Turtle Mountain was more or less, there was no settlements actually there. And all Turtle Mountain was a wintering ground. Okay, so people would winter on the south side to get out of the winds, and so there was a lot of wood there and water and whatnot. Sometimes people either were wintered or lived down in the Red River Valley, or they would go farther west to where the rivers were, like the Mouse River, the Souris River, the Missouri River, and where there was good shelter and stuff like that. But so Turtle Mountain was just an island out in the middle of the prairie. And so, yeah, they might winter there. It said that one time there was this two men who had come from the east. They were on horses and they seen Turtle Mountain and they'd heard about Turtle Mountain, but they'd never been there before. So they decided on the very east side, they were going to split up. And one was going to go on the north side and one was going to go on the south side. And they were going to meet on the very west side. Okay. One of them didn't think it was a good idea that they should stay together. The other boasted about, well, what are you scared of? We're only going to be apart for a couple of days. And the other said, case of danger, we should stick together, but they split up. This guy who had boasted, he moved south and he had gotten maybe a third of the way, and he was traveling below on the flatlands, and he could see Turtle Mountain up, wasn't very far off his trail, maybe 2 miles, 3 miles off and there would be the foothills. Anyway, he seen some buffalo, a really small herd of buffalo. And so he decided that he would kill a calf and that he could load that meat up. And when he'd meet his friend, he'd have fresh meat. Well, when he started chasing those buffalo, he was watching the buffalo more than where the horse was taking him. And so up ahead, the buffalo started veering off to the side of these trees. And but his horse kept going. And here it went into a bog. A bog is an area that's very wet. There's grass and willows that grow there, and the soil's really mucky and sticky. And so a person gets mired in this, and a lot of times they can't get out. Well, that was the case for this guy. He couldn't get his horse out, and he had a rough time. He did get out, but not until he had actually scraped his leg on, it could have been buffalo bones or parts of trees or brush, but he lacerated his leg, the side of his leg, pretty good. And so he actually packed that black muddy bog muck into the sore, hoping that it would heal. And and so, he realized as he was walking that maybe he should have listened to his brother, stayed together. Now look at him. He lost his horse and he's injured. And so, he started walking, but he realized he couldn't walk very far, and it was bleeding, and he wasn't sure what he was doing. He knew that his brother would come looking for him. So here he thought, well, I'll walk up towards the foothills here and I'll find shelter. I'll make a fire. And when I don't meet him on the west side, he'll come around and look for me and he'll see the smoke. And that was his plan. So he made it up there. And my gosh, where he walked here, there was this big spring. big spring. And he felt lucky. He felt good because he was thirsty. There was no creeks nearby, but this spring allowed a small stream to come out of it. And so he drank his fill, and, you know, he had actually grabbed his bags and what he could, and he had some dry meat in there, and he ate on that, and pretty soon Harry fell asleep. Well, that night he had a dream, and in the morning he sat straight up, and he felt himself he was covered with sweat. It was a frightful dream, scary dream. And Harry looked right away at the spring, and in his dream he was sitting there by that springs, and here all of a sudden he's seen a movement in the water, and it was coming right out of the center of that springs. There was a movement, there was something pushing up, and here it started rippling in a round circle, and here this big nose come pushing out, had scales on it, and here it was Michigan, a big one of the great serpents, great snakes, had poked his head out, and here it came up out of the water, and it was looking around, putting its nose up, and here it leaned over and seen him laying there on the ground, seen him, his wound like that. And Michigan Big says, "Do you dare come into the water where it will heal you? Do you dare come into it and wash your wound where it will be healed?" And so, and all of a sudden he woke up and he looked around, and, you know, he wasn't sure if he was dreaming or it was real. And so he just sat there for the longest time, and he was breathing hard, and he looked down at that water and was just calm, you know. And in the morning, cool out. He thought, he looked down, and here you could see this wound. By then the muck, the dirt, the mud had baked. It was hard. It was falling off his wound, and you could see it was getting infected, you know, and he thought he had to do something. So he eased his way, kind of shuffled over there while he was sitting down by the water's edge, and he moved over a little bit, and he, you know, into the water. He sat a little bit in the water and swung his foot around, you know, and it went down. There wasn't much of a lead. I mean, a shore, just kind of went down into the water where it was dark, and he threw the water on his leg like that, and he washed it and washed it, you know, until it was really clean, and he took some water for himself, and then he moved back over and put some more wood in the fire. Excuse me. You know, and he laid to rest. Before dark time, he did the same thing. And my gosh, the next day already it was looking a lot better, And so that night he thought to himself, well, he said, you know, he didn't have much, so he just took a piece of that meat, that dry meat, a little bit left, and he says, "I offer this to you, Michi." Big, he said, "Thank you," he said, "for giving me the strength to dare get myself healed, not be scared away." But a lot of times a spirit or something like that will dare you, try to frighten you away, see if you have the courage to do it. And so he put that down at the water's edge, and he washed it that night, and the next day here it was really healing good, and he started getting up and moving around, and here up in the grass over more from underneath the oaks, here he found wild turnips and he dug some and he ate and kept this fire going. My gosh, sure enough, about 4 days later, his friend found him. By then, his leg was really healed. There was just some red, like a red scar. It all come together. It was just pulled together, and he was just really surprised how quickly it healed. And he rode back part way, and his friend, who was unhurt, went back. They went back. His brother east, and they told the people about that place, Holy Springs, Sacred Springs. And it said that after that, people would stop there. They would purposely stop there. They would gather some of that water. It was cold and sweet tasting. But, you know, if the water pooled, rippled like that, they said it became sacred. There was some kind of spirit down underneath there, you know, that made that. And after the reservation was created and the people had to settle there, even the priests would come and fill up their milk containers, their metal milk containers. They would bring a wagon, horses, and they would fill up these metal containers and take them back to the church. And they would sell that as sacred water that had been part of the holy water from the church. But actually they got it there. Years later, they started putting up little cement, little statues of the different saints along when the water pooled, when the water came and pooled off and made a little stream. And so when I used to go there years and years ago, there was those little statues by the fence over here. But I don't know, the last time I was there, maybe 5-6 years ago, somebody must took all those out. But they say that sometimes men or women will go fast there because around it, nothing but nice grass, and there's big oaks, no brush, just nice big meadow there. And people will go there to fast. And when I was there, they have their offering cloths here and there hanging from those trees. And so I think people go there to fast and get healing from that water. Sometimes they'll take it home. Yeah. So there's another springs. They call it mineral springs. And that water is sacred also. And that sits north of Dunseith, which sits right in the south middle part of Turtle Mountain. And that spring, Willow Springs, is a big, huge lake up towards the Canadian border, and it has a nice creek that drains off and goes through Dunseith. But Mineral Springs, also from its volcanic kind of brownish volcanic rock, that water comes out of there and it flows into Willow Springs or Willow Creek. Many people who've been around there, especially early in the morning or in the evening, they'll hear laughter or childlike voices. And a lot of people have kind of snuck up on the other side of the creek where that Mineral Springs water goes down, and there's a big kind of gorge, and they'll see the Mimigwesi there. And they say that's where they live, the little people. Okay, that water is filled with a lot of minerals. And so I think part of that rock, it's kind of a brownish, reddish look, has a lot of mineral in it. But a lot of people go out there and fast. And my father-in-law's brother, Louis Cree. He fasted there when he was a young boy. And he claimed that's where he got his powers, his helpers were those little people. They showed him how to do a lot of different things. And, you know, he had some powers too. And so that's a sacred place. So that's probably about, it's about 2 miles north of the foothills. Yeah. So, but you can drive up pretty close to it. You have to walk in. But yeah, people still regard that as a sacred place, and they'll visit. People won't shoot deer around there. Yeah, so. Yeah. Any question? Do you have any questions online? Anybody? Forty-one minutes? Huh? 20 minutes?
I like that. That was a good story. I like all that. Serpent came up on the water. He wasn't sure if he was breathing or if it was real. Either way, it was, I think, you know, the way you tell the story or the story is so good.
I'll tell you another story about a lake right north of Dunseith on the foothills, and it involves a serpent, and people seen it. No, I haven't told that one since I hear. But so the Dakota people that live at Devil's Lake, out at Spirit Lake, they call it, or Devil's Lake, Fort Totten Reservation, they're Dakota. But they're mixed up with our people because there was a big boarding school there at one time. And it's still out there. And so they sent a lot of people from Turtle Mountain there, and of course the Dakota people, and a lot of them end up marrying. So a lot of Dakota and Chippewas are intermarried, and the men like coming up north and marrying our women because they say we have the best looking women. So I won't comment further than that. So that's from what I heard, because I used to work down there at Fort Totten. So anyway, so as I said in the first story about you know, these lakes, a lot of times they believe there's underground water channels. Now the Dakota, they have this big lake, and it's a pretty deep lake, and but it's really a Four Seasons lake, and there's a lot of people come to Devil's Lake to fish. I mean, even their casino that's on the lake, they have a big marina full of pontoons, all kinds of boats. And so it's a big water area that people enjoy. Historically, the people never, they fish from the shore, the Dakota, but they would never go out on the boat. And even to this day, many of them will not go out on a boat, because there's a very strong belief there that they have what do you call that, like at yeah, they have a Nessie. Yeah, they have a Nessie, and many people say they've seen it. Now we also have stories about Nanaju coming from the east into that area, and actually finding the largest one, the Messy-Genebig, where he killed them in the lake. That's another story though. Now, so there's a lake just north of Dunseith, maybe a quarter mile, half a mile on the east side of the highway, and it's called Lake Shooty, but its real name is Shooting Lake. Shooting Lake. In ancient times, that whole area north of Dunseith was one huge big campground where the Assiniboine, that was one of their major encampments. Another one was farther east, up by Holy Springs, down below Holy Springs. Okay, so it said that at one time the Dakota tried to come there and attack that camp, and they allowed them to come into the camp, but then they closed around them. And those warriors, Dakota warriors, never left there. After they killed them, they butchered their bodies and put them on a small, real high hill above the campground. And that's still there. And they let the birds and the fox and the coyotes and the wolves feast on their bodies. Right off that is Lake Shooting. Okay. Now, my father-in-law told me this story. He was just a little boy. And this is one of the stories that happened in the early 1920s. Him and his, he's probably a couple years older than his other brother, Louis. So this happened around 1928, 27 perhaps. And they were in a wagon and they were going to go to Belcourt. And it was early in the morning. So it's about 18 miles, maybe 20 miles, depends on the road you take to go to Belcourt from Dunseith. Anyway, that morning, early in the morning, it was light, it just got light, and a storm blew in. And so it started raining so hard that they all climbed on, they quit traveling. He said everybody got underneath the wagon to hide. And until the rain, the storm blew over. He said that rain and wind was just going sideways. My gosh, from where we were, my father, he said, Napishus, he pointed, look, he said, what is that? He said, see that? And here this big dark thing came out of the water. They could see down into Lake Shooty because the road was just right on the north side of it. And here it was a big snake. He said, big, huge snake. He said, gee, this thing, he said, I knew even as a boy, it was bigger around than a wooden water barrel. He said, it was that big. He said, it was huge, he said. And here it rised out maybe 10, 15 feet out, and it was just up there looking around in the rain, just looking around. He says, all of a sudden, he said, you could hear this crack, boom, and you seen this bolt of lightning come down and hit that snake. He said, everything, he said, just went white. The whole sky just went white, like we got blinded, he said. And moments later, here that bolt of lightning was attached to the head of that serpent. And it was just, there was a big flash around it. And I said, here that thing, it was actually pulling, the lightning bolt was pulling it out of the water because there was, the length of the snake was getting longer and longer and longer. And here he said, we watched it. We watched it, and it was just being taken up into that dark cloud. Right above the lake, he said, we were right down below it on the north side. We seen it, he said. Oh my gosh, he said. He said, I turned to my brother, he said, Louis, he says, we're never gonna swim in that lake again. We're never gonna swim in that lake again, he said. Yeah, he said that lightning thunder took that big serpent right up into the clouds, he said. You could see its tail disappear. Yeah, he said, and then all of a sudden it just, the rain stopped, the wind stopped, and the clouds just kind of spread, he said. He said, my dad, he said, he didn't say anything. We all got back up on top and he held out. And he said, my dad didn't say anything for a long time, he said. Yeah. Yeah.
What did you say?
Yeah. Well, don't say anything. You just think, oh, that's one big swimming pool. I'm not gonna. But you know, to this day, on the east side of that lake, and it's not very long. I suppose it's about as long as a football field, maybe longer, a little bit longer, about a foot. It's about a whole, maybe about 450 feet long by maybe 150 feet wide. But that was when I worked for the forestry department back in the late 70s and early 80s. We did go around and measure the depths of the different bigger lakes. And we had these big steel like blocks with a handle on them. And our boats were had these cables where you can unwind them and lower, and we'd measure the depth of the lakes from the shores in every 50 feet. And they said at 300 feet with a cable, we could still take the metal rod and pull on it, and it was still loose down there. It wasn't hitting solid. You could feel it. So I don't know. I kind of think there's something. There must be some channel because that water doesn't go out. It doesn't go out. Sometimes you will see that the water comes up and goes down. I don't know what that's due to, but on the east side, they have a swimming beach now. So, yeah. So. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, Travis and I, we are working on a 13th month calendar. There's 13 months in the year. Here it is. So in August, there is a full moon at the beginning of the month and a full moon at the end of the month. So we do within the 12-month calendar years, we have 13 moons. Okay. So we are making a Plains Ojibwe traditional calendar. And this is the sacred circle and colors of the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa people. There is no black in it. There's a blue, red, white, and yellow. And it's not like a cross, like that kind of a medicine. That's more of the Lakota, Dakota. Ours goes across like that. It's what? Yeah, like an X. Yeah. That's the one that even the Great Lakes people use. So, anyway, so within each of these moons, there's 13 Anishinaabe names for the moon for the month. And we also have on there what happens during that month. Okay. Like for example, the Manitou Gisasoon, the little spirit moon, December, a Pipong solstice. So that's the start of winter. A lot of times we have a community feast. We bring our community together, have a feast. remembering this is, the hardship of winter. People need not to stay isolated, but visit often and be helpful to one another. And so it goes around there every month. Different kinds of harvests, planting, ceremonies that take place during those moons. And so this is like on a birch bark, Buffalo Lodge, Plains, Ojibwe, the different clans. And then up here where it says 13 moon calendar, you can see it's a turtle's back, because they say the turtle has 13 shells. Oh yeah, right here. Yeah, sure, with the feather, double feather. So Travis and I are making this, and we're going to create a big colored poster that will be available to the little shell. So it'll kind of remind people that month what's going to happen or what you should be doing. Feast, ceremonies that our people practice. Of course, usually that had to do with that particular month. So coming of age ceremonies could happen anytime. Madudu Swan Sweat Lodges could happen anytime. It's not no different thing. Graduation, different things could happen. Birthdays, of course. We do have the date when we usually put on our, like the Medewan, the spring and fall, late summer, different things. Let's see. The medicine harvest, natural foods. There's offerings and feasts, family and communal event. July, Kigushishimu. That's when vision quests happen in July. Especially the young boys, they go on vision quests that time. June, Nipi Kweshamwin, or thirsty dance would happen for the Plains Ojibwe people. The frog croaking moon in May. You'd have your teaching lodge, Medewan, your woman's water ceremonies, offerings and feasts for the Wigwas, Mitigug, the birch bark tree family feasts. Our Memorial Day happened also in May, but it could be any day of that month, that moon, the remembrance days. So people would go out and, fix up the graves of their departed. They'd have their feast out there, their singings, make their offerings. They'd go out there as a family group and cook. And they'd offer some food on little spirit dishes to their different loved ones. So they'd sing. So it could be any day. It doesn't sit a particular day like the regular calendar. It could be any day of that month. So yeah, things like that. So it'll have a lot of information. So yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What is the first thunder on?
Yeah, in the spring. Yeah.
The stuff you do, it's not like, keep it more at home, just so they can expand easily.
Yeah, you have your tobacco offerings, first thunder comes, things like that, Yeah, I don't know about we're going to do with these the actual numericals. I think if we could, I'm kind of, we can, I don't know. Yeah, it's not done, just first draft. But I got to thank Travis for a lot of their artwork. He does wonderful, good work on it. And yeah. So, yeah. So hopefully in a month or two, that'll be available to all those Shell members, free of charge. So you'll kind of get a basic idea when these things are going to happen. So what's going to be happening every month. So, yeah.
Well, you guys are doing great things.
We're trying. We're trying.
Love to see more people come to attendees as we go forward within the community.
We got to get the word out more beside our just our website, our Facebook and our news bulletin. We got to access more of the county and city news. Yeah.
I think you'll see a lot more people spring, summer.
Oh, yeah.
Things weather.
Well, it's been a pretty good winter so far. I guess.
I'm telling you, kind of nice. You got something on Tuesday nights and Wednesday nights, every week.
And Thursday night too. This coming Thursday, well, my sister Margie's been doing the ribbon skirts on Thursday day and then Saturday. Yeah, well, next week or next month. And so in February and March, on Thursday nights from 6 to 8, we're going to have beadworking classes and also moccasin making classes. And I just sent for all that material today. So, yeah.
Social media as well.
Yeah.
And the first come, first served registration. However, we will be taking more people and kind of have a waiting list as well, because as we've seen in the past, people will come and then fall off. So instead of just having an empty spot, like this
Very much. No.
We could have people that show up that didn't sign up for sure not it. They get a whole bunch of people. Don't see that.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's what we got coming up. I think winter time can be a fun time as long as we have some good activities going on. Trying to get people to, just take a risk and come out. I know everybody's tired after a day of work or whatever, but heck, I mean, after you get here, it's not so bad. So. Well, I want to thank everybody that showed up tonight, our two in-person people. We are giving them $100 gift cards. Jokes. I'm just kidding. Oh, dang. And they were saying I should have went. No, I'm just joking. Maybe we should have some door prizes. So anyway, we're having it now up at the Cultural Center. There shouldn't be no problem now having it up here. And I want to thank everybody that attended on Zoom. Appreciate you taking the time to do that. Appreciate that very much. So if you can be here tomorrow night, we are finishing the second and final part of the Medeawin. What is the Medeawin? And so the first part was pretty interesting. The second part is broken down into more what the teachings are about and teaching concepts and learning concepts. So, huh? What's that? Oh yeah, and Soup and Story with Mr. Calvin Gone is this Saturday at the Alliance for Youth. Everybody's welcome to that, and I believe they have a gentleman from Lee a Mr. Lee Hool from the Rocky Boy Reservation, given a presentation, huh? On homeless kids. Is it on homeless kids?
He doesn't.
Huh? Oh, he works with the homeless natives, okay, which should be really interesting. So I've been to almost all of these since I've been here, and they're always just great. It's a good time. I mean, and then of course everybody eats. Mr. Gahn makes sure there's some really good soup that is brought, so. And they do have door prizes there. All kinds of door prizes, so. At the Alliance for Youth, and it starts at 2:00 in the afternoon. All right, so. And then, of course, this Thursday, Mrs. Johnson is going to be having her dressmaking class. Ribbon skirt class, and that's at 1 to 2:30, and then Saturday from 1 to 2:30. Excuse me, 11 to 1. And she does have openings. Some of the people that signed up are not attending, so and they have material ribbon. And if you want to come, those will be down at the program building where all the machines are, sewing machines and stuff. So there'll be somebody there. So, all right, you guys have a good evening. Big witch.